With the R9, Yamaha has now delivered a worthy successor to the well-known R6. We've already ridden it as well. There is a very detailed test report on it. So if you click through to that, you'll find out all the new features Yamaha has brought in with the R9. Now, we've gone one step further. We wanted to find out how this thing can be optimized even more for the racetrack. A standard production bike is always a compromise, of course, especially on track. We've modified a few things here, and what exactly that's all about is what we're going to show you now. Yes, the fact that the R9 has racing genes in its DNA is already well known by now. We've also been able to test it on the racetrack, although only in its standard configuration. Anything that's homologated always comes with a few disadvantages on track. And since many of you will probably want to use this bike on the racetrack as well, we set about modifying exactly those annoying gimmicks that often come with a standard bike. We wanted to find out what it looks like on track now, what benefits we can still get from it. And I'd say as a starting point, let's perhaps take a closer look at everything we've changed so far. The most obvious change, of course, is the fairing. We fitted an aftermarket fairing here, which no longer includes all the unnecessary bits and pieces you need for the road. Lights, indicators, all of that is gone, of course. We've also fitted a race seat, which is always important as well. As you can see, it only has a very thin pad on it. That means the firmness and therefore the feedback you get through the seat of your leathers is much sharper and more direct. The riding position is slightly different too. It sits a bit higher, so you don't end up with such an extreme knee angle down to the foot pegs. The foot pegs, as you can see, are still the standard ones. We'll see how well they prove themselves on the racetrack. Maybe we'll take that one step further afterwards. Another thing we changed with the fairing is the screen. It's a bit taller. On the racetrack, you're usually traveling at higher speeds, and good wind protection normally brings a huge advantage. So you can keep your head steady, especially down the straights, without annoying vibrations. And so you can also clearly pick out your braking marker. What we also did at the same time was fit a different fuel cap. By the way, the parts we've installed here are all from GYTR, so from Yamaha's own accessories catalog. That makes them relatively straightforward to order as well. The fuel cap is what's known as a quick release cap, which you can open and close with a simple twist of the hand. So if you don't happen to have the key ready, you can still refuel the bike here. We've left the key itself in place for now, so the ignition barrel is still the standard one. If you later convert it into a proper race bike, that's something you could remove as well. What else have we done? What you can also see, of course, are a few crash protection parts and a few covers. They're there to make sure that if the worst happens, no important parts get damaged and that the bike still gets a certain level of protection in the event of a crash. Of course, we've also kept the brake lever guard fitted. That's there to make sure that if you make contact with another rider on track, the brake can't be applied by accident, which could otherwise instantly launch you off the bike. And while we're on the subject of the handlebars, we've also fitted different clip-ons, which give you a slightly different position and a bit more of a sporty stance, so you get plenty of feel for the front end. We've also worked on the brakes. We've fitted the 19mm Corsa Corta from Brembo, which should give us a clean, precise pressure point. We've also fitted different brake discs, again from Brembo. That should give us strong performance under braking as well. On top of that, we've fitted a thumb brake. For those of you who've never ridden with one or maybe haven't heard of it before, it works together with the rear foot brake. It gives you the option, especially in right-hand lean angles where you can no longer reach the brake pedal with your foot, to apply extra braking force to the rear wheel here with your thumb. So if, for example, you run a little wide into a corner, you can still use the rear brake. In left-hand corners, it's fairly easy because there I can always make use of the rear brake with my foot. That doesn't work in right-hand lean angles, and that's why this system became established. I used to like using it in races myself as well because it allows you to brake with your thumb here too. Technically, the way it's done is that we need a slightly different rear brake master cylinder. It's not only operated by the rear brake pedal, but also pressurized by the thumb brake through an additional hydraulic line, and that then passes the braking force onto the rear tire. Another necessary evil for the racetrack is adjusting the gearing. Standard production bikes are usually geared for very high top speeds, which is often a bit of a nuisance on track. After all, we don't get anywhere near the top speed these bikes would actually be capable of delivering. That's why we need to gear it a bit shorter. As standard, it comes with a 1643 gearing setup. Here, we've gone one tooth down at the front and changed it to 1543. At the same time, we've also fitted a very light race chain in a 520 size, so we can keep friction and power losses nice and low. This doesn't work when you're leaned over to the right, and that's exactly why this system became established. I used to like using it in races myself because it lets you brake with your thumb as well. Technically, it's solved by using a slightly different rear brake master cylinder. It's not only operated by the rear brake pedal, but also pressurized by the thumb brake through an additional hydraulic line. That then sends the braking force to the rear tire. Another necessary evil for the racetrack is adapting the gearing. Standard production bikes are usually geared for very high top speeds, which is often more of a disadvantage on track. After all, we don't get anywhere near the top speed these bikes would actually be capable of. That's why we need to gear it a bit shorter. As standard, it runs a 1643 gearing setup. Here, we've gone one tooth smaller at the front and changed it to 1543. At the same time, we've also fitted a very light 520 race chain so we can keep friction and power losses as low as possible. We've fitted an Ohlins TTX 25 closed cartridge here with the corresponding springs. It's been given a setting that should suit the racetrack as well. We'll talk about exactly how it works a little later on. So that's it for the chassis. Of course, we've also done a bit of work on the engine side, and the most obvious change is the exhaust. We fitted an open Akrapovic exhaust system here. We don't have to stick to specific decibel limits in this case, but we still didn't want it to be completely loud because even at track days and at various circuits, there are noise limits these days that need to be respected. That's why we've also integrated a small pre-silencer here, which keeps the noise a little under control. I still think the sound is really good and quite aggressive, but not so loud that it would cause any problems. Of course, we've also fitted a race ECU, which gives us the necessary adjustments for the changed exhaust configuration. And as a nice little bonus, it also gives us 500 extra revs, which is always a welcome bit extra on the racetrack. So the engine can breathe freely as well. Because we've already fitted an open exhaust system, we obviously also need to look at the intake side. For that, we've now fitted an open DN air filter system, which also has a completely open cover at the top. This is really intended primarily for racing. For road use, I'd be a little careful here because, of course, the filtering effect is reduced slightly. And finally, the grip we need here on the racetrack comes from the tires. For our test, we've chosen the Michelin Performance Slicks in a 120 front and 190 rear size. That should give us the grip we need, and how they work, also in combination with everything else, is something we'll tell you about in just a moment. So that's it for all the updates we've made here. We're now getting ready for the first sessions. We're going to take a very close look at the bike, see how the modifications perform, and we'll give you all that information right after this. We've now already completed the tune-up on our R9, but there's more coming your way as well. In the background, we've already been working on a Kawasaki ZX6, which we're also giving a tune-up here. We already had it with us today at the Pannonia Ring, and we'll start taking the first steps and making the first refinements. What the result is with that bike and how it compares to the R9 is something you'll find out in the next episode when we bring you the information directly from the Slovakia Ring. I've now spent a full day here at the Pannonia Ring working with our R9 tune-up. First and foremost, I focused on the suspension setup, adjusted the ergonomics a little, and in the end, we're now at the point where it's time for the truth. What has the tune-up actually given us? And what can you expect from updates like these for your own bike at home? Let's start with the engine. We've fitted an open airbox here, the DNA Stage 2. There's no cover on the top anymore. And I have to say, Acoustically, it sounds like an extremely big and powerful engine. At first, I honestly thought the engine had developed some kind of problem because the resonance from below was extremely loud and really stands out acoustically. In combination with the open exhaust system and the different ECU, this now gives us a bit more punch across the whole rev range, but especially from the mid-range onwards, the whole thing starts driving forward noticeably harder. And thanks to the higher maximum rev limit of now 11,000 RPM, which is 500 more than standard, we've got a bit more room at the top end to call up the power as well. Especially here on the racetrack, that's a decisive advantage. The throttle response setup is fairly uneventful and it already was in standard trim, so there was no reason to expect any problems there. In terms of the electronic settings and rider aids, we have the same system logic as on the original bike. The engine now really does help to generate a bit more drive on the racetrack and gives it more punch right at the top end. And that was always a bit of the disadvantage the R9 had compared with an R6. With its high revving four-cylinder engine, the R6 was basically made for track use. With the R9 in standard trim though, things are a little cut off at the top and feel slightly flat. These updates help the bike get much closer to the R6 in that respect. At the same time though, you still benefit from the fact that the engine punches much harder out of the mid-range than a comparable 600 four-cylinder engine. And that's why I think from an engine point of view, there are now quite a few advantages to be found here on the R9 compared with an R6. In the end, I have to say I'm really very happy with this update and genuinely surprised as well. At the beginning, I thought it would be difficult for the R9 to keep up with an R6, especially on the racetrack. But by now, I have to say I'm convinced by the concept too. And I think a lot of riders will probably be faster on this than on the R6. That's simply because the engine offers a much broader spread of power and already performs really well from low revs. That said, you do have to make a few adjustments just like we've done here so that it delivers a bit more power at the top end as well. What's maybe important for you to know if you want to take something like this to track days is this pre-silencer that you can get for the racing system. It reduces the noise exactly. Yes, exactly that one. We tried it without it as well, but then this thing really is properly loud. Okay, if you're riding on circuits where that doesn't matter, then of course you can happily run it like that. But just so you know, there is a good option here to bring the noise down a bit. So with that, we're basically at the end already. I have to say, I'm positively surprised by how well this bike performs. It's a huge amount of fun, especially on racetracks like this one, which are technically demanding and don't have ultra long straights. I think Yamaha has a very good starting point with this package for the upcoming Supersport World Championship, where they'll be lining up with this bike. The first results are already looking good as well. So if this is something you're interested in too, I can definitely recommend these tune-up measures. They mainly affect the peripheral components rather than going deep into the engine itself. And in terms of cost versus benefit, this is definitely worth investing in if you want to be well set up on the racetrack. That works very well. Yes, I hope I've been able to give you a few helpful tips here when it comes to getting an R9 ready for the racetrack, and I hope we'll see each other again for one of the next tune-ups. Until then, I'm signing off from the Pannonia Ring. Once again, goodbye.